It's great to see coming up from the 15th to the 27th of October, certainly in Melbourne at Palace Cinemas, is the 29th annual Greek Film Festival. And it's my great pleasure to be talking to the chair of the Cultural Committee of the Greek community in Melbourne, and that's Leonidas Vlahakis. Leonidas, welcome again to Movie Metropolis.
Wonderful to be back here again. Thank you. I'm going to do it from now. Thank you very much for your interest. It's massively appreciated. And it's going to be a great couple of weeks.
I'm sure it will be because I noticed that there are about 29 films in the schedule. So that's
There's 20, there's
great.
20, there's 20 something films and seven docos, I think.
Yep, yep. There's docos and there's a few Australian films as well.
Absolutely. So we've got ones, for example, Brando with a Glass Eye.
Right. I love the title.
It's a super title. Look, I often think that with some films that you get the title right, people will come just because of that. It's a great concept. So there is that little bit of Australian spice to it. Absolutely. There's
Okay.
there's a it's a really nice spread this year.
Great. Now, we'll talk about some of the films in a moment, but I wanted to ask you about the Greek film situation. How is the Greek film industry operating at the moment? Are films being made?
I One of my very, very good friends is both a lawyer and a cinephile, and she works for the Greek Film Centre, Eleni Berte. She produces a few films as well. And she came out a few years ago and was interviewed on radio. And they asked her, what's the difference between the Australian film scene and the Greek film scene? And it was just about this time of year. It was grand final week, and she said the difference is that to produce a 30-second ad to be played at the grand final, the footy grand final, costs $1.5 million. And that's the entire budget of the Greek Film Centre annually.
Wow.
It's tough. It's a challenge. So, you've got films made for 5, 10,000 euro, where the producer will, excuse me, the producer will call up his mates and say, "Listen, I'm doing a film. If you've got €1,000, you can give me, and if I make any money at the end, I'll give it back to you."
Mm.
So it's a challenge. What that means is that um, they have to get more inventive as well. They have to be creative in terms of the set design, in terms of the whole scenario of the film. Um, and look, there's no question that some of the best movies that I've seen in the past few years have been produced with the cooperation of either and the support of either the European Union or Hollywood. But certainly the homegrown stuff, there's some real quality as well. I mean, there's one movie, Fornissa, The Murderers,
Ah,
which has won awards all throughout Europe, and it's actually Greece's submission to the Oscars this year in the foreign language, and it is an extraordinarily powerful film. But the lead actress, Karafilia Karabet, is one of the finest exponents of both um, classical Greek theatre as well as modern Greek movie.
uh-huh. Well, that's one
Yeah.
film I marked as definitely wanting to see during the festival because as you say, it's the best international feature submission by Greece. So excellent stuff. All right, let's go through some of the films. And the opening night film, and I'm looking forward to being there at opening night, is a film called Hear Who's Talking.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I look forward to seeing you again on opening night, by the way, because I'll be the MC. It's an interesting premise. So it's a counselor slash therapist who has voices in his head. And so half the movie is, well, I would say a third of the movie is how he treats his patients slash clients. A third is how he deals with his own internal monologue. And the other third is the romantic side. Understand, Peter, that you always want to start the movie, or the film festival off on a positive note.
Hmm.
And so we thought that introducing sort of a light romantic comedy would would be a nice way of doing it.
Sure.
So that people at least leave with half a smile on their dial, yeah?
And that's fair
Yeah,
enough
yeah,
because you always have to juggle so much when you program a film festival
of course.
about opening and closing night and audiences and a range of films, um,
Sure.
comedy, drama, doco, etc. So, and it looks like you've got quite a selection of films this year.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It seems, and this certainly wasn't something that we purposefully curated, but three of the films um, have to do with the relationship between kids, fully grown kids, children, and their parents. So there's Where We Live in the Promotion. The Promotion in particular is a really charming film. I loved it. Again, the the budget wouldn't have been great,
Hmm.
but they've managed through use of sort of subtle imagery and lighting and really poignant scenes to get engrossed in this movie that was a bit of a tearjerker from me. Where We Live's a little bit more, it hits you a little bit more between the eyes. And again, as I think I said to you last year, it's amazing that the Greek financial crisis hit back in 2008,
Hmm.
and yet there are still films that either implicitly or explicitly refer to it. Yeah.
Yep.
Um, then there's the wonderfully charming Polydroso. Um, Polydroso is a mythical suburb in Athens, and the movie deals with the relationship between mother and daughter, both when they were young and now that they're both adults. So they're interesting things to explore, and they're ones that I'll take my parents to go and see for sure.
And that's fair enough too. You've also got some darker films in the festival too. I think, is it called Detached House?
Detached House is there are a lot of themes and subplots in that movie. Um, Again, what I love about European films in general, Hollywood produces good guy and bad guy. And a lot of European films just say, look, I'm going to tell you a story and you work it out for yourself. Detached House is it's certainly a roller coaster of emotions. And it's one of those movies where I'd love to talk to the director and the producer and say, can you walk me through what happens above your midbrain? Yeah, yeah, but look, it's worth the effort.
Yes, yes. Well, I mean, have strong memories of how Yorgos Lanthimos has broken through
Oh,
and has made now a number of excellent films.
look, there's no question that he is the doyen of the Greek weird wave of cinema,
Right.
and testament to his quality is the fact that he's got so many big names, Hollywood stars that are knocking down his door, saying, "Okay, what's our next project together?" I think it's fantastic.
Yes. Absolutely. It's great to have some breakthrough filmmakers. Now, back to what's screening as part of the Greek Film Festival, October 15th to the 27th at Palace Cinemas. And I noticed a documentary on Maria Callas.
Amazing. Look, what can you say about Maria? She was not just the voice of a generation. She's objectively regarded as the best proponent of her craft. Yeah. Beautiful in every way, passionate about her work. Obviously, we know about her private life, but it's a really tastefully done documentary about someone who, as long as there's beautiful things in the world,
Yep.
Maria Callas will be right up there.
And I think they're releasing shortly in Australia a feature film on Maria Callas. Um,
That's what I've heard. I'm not sure when it's going to be. I don't think, well, it's not going to be this year, but it
no.
definitely is coming down.
Yeah, yeah, I noticed it's coming up. So, yeah. Okay. Now, another documentary I noticed now, I don't know Yannis Spanos, but it looks like he's a well-known Greek actor or singer or whatever, I think.
Singer, yeah, yeah, musician. Started from some little village in the central north of Greece. Moved to Paris. His talent got him into the biggest shows in town. Sorry about that. That's the ambulance going to the Alfred. Um, Ended up being one of Greece's finest musicians. And this is, we're talking about how many years ago. Um, and also being as good as he was, from all accounts, a really fine human being, very noble and humble, and never forgot his roots, and was always proud of his nationality and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, yeah, that's it. That again, a really tastefully done documentary.
Okay,
Mm.
excellent. Another title that intrigued me is a film called Little Things That Went Wrong.
Oh yes, this is a very interesting plot line. Um, Now that one is, I'm just looking it up in the program because I want to mention one of the actors. Yeah, it again. Sometimes you have to get really creative when it comes to your film. Um, this film centers around a dog, believe it or not.
Right.
So there's one actor who had his 15 minutes of fame, and those 15 minutes have very well and truly expired. And then there's a completely different chap, and their two lives get intertwined over the death of a dog
Mm.
and what they do to try and cover up for it, and the way families get involved in those different ways. So again, it's a very European thing. There's no good or bad guy in this. There's just this story. And in the end, you find yourself thinking, okay, so what would I do if I were them? Or what would I do differently if I were them?
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Again, I like these diverse themes and topics. It's
Yeah.
terrific. Back to documentary, I noticed one about the bouzouki called Broken Sound.
Look, let's understand that the bouzouki is the quintessential
Mm.
instrument of Greece. Like me being a Southern Greek would say it's the clarinet, but other people play the clarinet. Whereas the bouzouki, having been played for however many decades, um, comes to symbolize the the clarity of Greek music. And if you look at a lot of these tunes from, let's say, the 1920s, even up until now, will start with this bouzouki riff that's a lot sharper than, let's say, a guitar. Yeah.
Mm.
And this documentary goes to, number one, how physically it's produced. Number two, the significance that it's had on not just Greek music, but Greek culture over the course of, a good century. I mean, I've got one here and I still, have a pluck once in a while.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Now, notice a film called The Last Taxi Driver.
Um, it's not a comedy and it's not for the faint-hearted.
Ah.
And I would say it's more, I would call it more a psychological thriller, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
In the sense that it starts off pleasant enough, but it also starts off with a slightly dark undertone. Um, then things go wrong for this taxi driver. Uh, and it draws you into his world. That movie could well have been a play. It's got really tight angles, if you know what I mean.
Mm.
The ending is, I'm not going to say traumatic, but it certainly is dramatic, where you're drawn into this world where this taxi driver is spinning out of control, and you can sort of sympathize with him. You can understand where he's coming from, even though you might not like it. You'd say, what if it were me? Yeah. There was a movie, I don't know if you saw it a couple of years ago, starring Makis Papadimitriou called Sunburn. And it was to do with a young doctor that was had been commissioned to work on an island in the summer. And he fell in love with one of the young girls there that was camping.
Yep.
And he's spiraling into this vortex that he can't get out of.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
so look, the Last Taxi Driver, it's another one of these really serious movies that just draws you in. And understand that this particular taxi driver, his passion was literature.
Hmm.
So he will often do a bit of psychoanalysis on his clients, on his passengers, um, and reference certain big writers. So you've got this taxi driver, but again, because of the situation, because of the crisis, he's forced into the situation. Yeah.
Okay. Again, it's good to have that mixture of comedies,
It is.
dramas, of challenging films, of family friendly, and so on. So that's great. Now, I noticed a documentary, an Australian one, I think it is, called Anzac, the Greek Chapter. And we've seen a few films about the connection, Gallipoli and everything about Greece and Australia during the war.
Let's understand, Peter, and I think this is an unfortunately not well told story. The word Anzac has been used once in the First World War, talking about Gallipoli, where the Greeks fought with the Anzacs.
Yep.
And the second and last time we used the word Anzacs was in the Second World War.
Hmm.
And the story is that the Aussies were trained, the Anzacs were trained to fight in Egypt, in the desert. And once that was done, Churchill said, well, send them up to Greece. And the Anzacs said, what do we know about fighting in mountainous Greece? And so they said, look, don't worry about it. They'd land them at the port in Piraeus. They'd give them a map and say, march north, follow either the train track or the electricity poles.
Hmm.
Let's not understate the very special bond that the Anzacs have with Greece. I mean, you go to somewhere like Crete, and there are towns that have got Adelaide Street, Melbourne Street, Sydney Street, Perth Street, Brisbane Street. Yeah.
Hmm.
And if I can, just a slight digression, where I work at the Australian College of Optometry, back in the dispensary, my friend Aidan, he came to work one day with these coins, and they were written in Greek. And he says, "Is this Greek?" I said, "Yeah, where are they from?" He said, "Oh, my granddad, he fought in Greece in the Second World War." I said, "But what's he got Greek coins?" The reason he's got Greek coins is because Australian protocol dictates that uh, a coin for soldiers for bravery will only be minted based on the advice of the British government. And because not enough Brits went to fight in Greece in the Second World War, no coins were commissioned. The Greeks thought that was unfair because of the bravery that the Anzacs had shown,
Hmm.
that they minted their own coins for the Anzacs. And again, it's symbolic, but it also attests to the really strong bond that we should never underestimate between the Anzacs and between my motherland.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. No, that's well explained. Now,
Hmm.
I noticed on closing night you've got a restored film from
Yeah.
1968, which I'll
Yeah.
get you to pronounce because I can't. And but it sounds so interesting to conclude the festival.
So Gorones que Mages, which is mermaids and rascals,
Ah,
is a beautiful. Look, it harks back to a time, Peter, when, believe it or not, back in the 60s and early 70s, per capita, Greece produced more films than anywhere else in the world. It was the Bollywood of Europe, yeah. Um, the lead actress, Maria Chronopoulou, who unfortunately passed away recently, apart from being a magnificent woman, had a beautiful voice. The soundtrack is incredible. There's got to be a good half dozen number one hits in it. So it's almost like it's a romantic comedy musical, if you know what I mean.
Hmm.
It just harks back to the simpler times. My hope is that if we get enough momentum, we can sort of do a 60s theme to it, which means that I have to raid my dad find some of his old suits. But it's a gorgeous film. And it closes off with a really, truly beautiful song.
Okay.
Whose title is I Cried Last Night.
Uh,
Yeah. It's just lovely. Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
And it'll be at the airport again on closing night, which is super.
yes, that's a closing line. I'm assuming when I looked at the program that every film in Greek is subtitled in English.
Absolutely. Yep. 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 Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely. That's our policy.
good, good. Because I remember some years back when you screened some Greek films but no subtitles. So
There were a couple that unfortunately part of the problem is that especially for some of the older films,
mm,
number one, they didn't have the funds for it.
yeah,
And number two, we couldn't find the producers to say, is there a subtitled version? And so yes, and those ones that are be fair, there aren't any that aren't subtitled this year, but ones that aren't will be clearly labeled in the program.
right. Okay. No, no, that's fine. That's good. Because I
Yep.
assume obviously the Greek community would be an important audience for the festival, but you'd also want a broader audience as well.
Absolutely. Look, it's something, Peter, that we've said. If all we're doing is offering films to the local Greek community, then that's breathtaking navel gazing. Yeah.
Mm,
What I want is for people such as yourself to come and see these films and say, you know what, the Greeks have got a story to tell.
mm,
So it's sort of like the festival that we have in February in the city. And it's not the festival that we put on for Greeks. It's the Greek festival that we put on for Melburnians.
mm.
So, we've got a documentary on Ferenc Puskás. I think it's called Ange and Me. Ferenc Puskás at one stage in the 50s was regarded as the best soccer player on the planet.
Ah,
He was the captain of the Hungarian national team that for 3 years was pretty much impregnable. He won three Champions League titles with Real Madrid. I don't know how we got that lucky, but this guy came to Australia, to Melbourne, and in fact lived in my suburb in Ashwood, and he coached South Melbourne Hellas to the national championship in '91.
ah,
Now, why? Yes, South Melbourne Hellas is obviously a Greek team,
mm,
explicit in the name, but why shouldn't other soccer fans want to come and listen to the story of one of the in the top 10 best players in the history of the world?
right. Fair point.
Hmm.
Okay, we've covered a fair number of films, but Leonidas, are there one or two other films that you'd like to draw my audience's attention to?
I think we've covered most of my favourite ones, to be honest with you. I'm just looking through the program
Yep,
where we live, the boss, Anzac, the fishbowl, guest study. No, they're all good. Opening and closing nights in particular
yep.
are super. The one event that I would like to point out, which happens on the final day at the Como, is the Greek Student Film Festival,
Ah, right.
and it's superb to see these kids, and I say it with love and respect, to see these groups of kids either doing old stories in a very different way, in a very different fashion, or coming up with really novel ideas of their own. And it gives me, as an Australian Greek, it gives me hope that next generation will pick up the mantle that we necessarily will give them and run with it in their very own fashion. So the Student Film Festival is great fun.
Hmm. I
Yeah.
remember seeing Greek student films over the last year. So yes, I agree with you. That's terrific. Well, look, congratulations on the festival, Leonidas. It's at Palace Cinemas at the Astor, Como, Balwyn, and Pentridge. And it's on from the 15th to the 27th of October, the 29th Greek Film Festival.
Yep.
And Leonidas, I just wanted to ask you very quickly, apart from what's in the Greek Film Festival, have you seen any other films or on streaming or whatever that impressed you?
The last one that I saw, and I would watch it again, and it was a real work of art, was this Spanish movie, The Teacher Who Promised the Sea.
Ah, yes,
That was glorious. It was just, again, you just have these tales, and this one was based on a true story. Um, I thought it was just a beautiful tale, so very well done.
yep,
The teacher was charismatic, the kids were charming, the whole scene just gripped you from basically the very start.
yes,
And
absolutely, I agree. Yep.
the only other one I saw was oh, the British guy who saved the all those Jews.
Oh, yes, Anthony Hopkins starred in it.
Anthony Hopkins, yes, 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 yes,
Yes,
yes. That
um,
was, I mean, the reason I saw that was because I I'd been I'd seen a clip where it happened in real life, where there was that TV show where they
yes,
had David Winton, I think was his name,
yep,
and they had in there and sort of said, look, if this guy saved your life, can you put your hand up? And it turns out that the whole room was filled with these people. And I've got to tell you, if you don't get emotional, to see the look on their faces and to see the look on his face,
mhm,
then you're not human. It was such a beautiful story,
yes,
so very well told. And look, when you've got Anthony Hopkins, you've got one of the greats. Yeah. So yeah,
very.
I enjoyed that, but for very different reasons to the teacher that promised to see. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. No, they're good recommendations. I agree, and of course, we recommend the Greek Film Festival coming up October 15th to 27th, and we've been speaking to Leonidas Vlahakis. Thank you so much, Leonidas, for talking with me, and hope the festival goes well.
Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you on Tuesday night.
Yes, at the Astor for the opening night. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Leonidas. All the best.
Have a great day.
Bye bye.